Hello and welcome to my small tutorial on how to do a layered stencil from a photograph with Photoshop and Illustrator. You can do this actually without Illustrator, and if you actually have CS2 or newer, you can actually use a thing and import the photo directly into Illustrator and use Live Trace. But I do not have that. I have CS. This is Adobe Photoshop CS and Adobe Illustrator CS. Maybe I'll redo it when I get CS3 in the near future here. Only way or the best way, this is just the way I currently do my layered stencils. First of all, you bring your photo into Photoshop. Like I have Han Solo and Carbonite here, just as an example. First thing I tend to do is bring the photo in. You don't want any of the background, so that's useless. So I take the pen tool, which is this here, and I pretty much get a rough outline of what I want. Your Path tab, which should be in with your layers, and you click on this little dot circle here, which will convert that work path into a selection. Then you go back to your layers, undo your back, make sure your background is actually a layer, not locked. Hit Shift Apple I if you're on a Mac, or Control Alt I believe it is on a PC, then the delete key, which will eliminate the background. Next thing you want to do is deselect, so hit Alt D or Apple D, depending on what system you're on. Then you want to hit Shift Alt or Apple, and then U, which will convert it to a black and white composition. Then here's how I do the color separation through here. You go to Filter, down to Artistic, then to Cutout. And it's going to bring up this humongous dialog, which will give you pretty much what you're looking for here. You might need to mess with that. I use 4. Number of levels is 4, even though this will be a three stencil project, because in actuality I would use white as my background, and then whatever's white I would just leave white. This looks okay if you wanted to go with more layers. If you went with like 5 layers, you get more detail, but 4 layers will get the point across for the most part. Actually, I'm going to do something first. A lot of times if you go to Image, Adjust, Brightness and Contrast, and turn the contrast up a little bit, you get a little bit better results when you do the cutout filter. That's about the same. Anyway, you do that, then you click OK. And here's where the magic part comes in, and this is what I found to work fairly well for me. Go to Select, Color Range, and then you select a color. I usually start with the darkest color, and it'll give you this. I leave my fuzziness about 29, or 49, sorry. That usually gets me a good solid color, just one color. Then you hit OK, which will give you a selection of everything that's that color. Then you go back to your paths, and then instead of where that dotted circle is, there's one next where it's got the little handlebars on it. You click that, turns it into a work path. Then you hit Control C or Apple C, depending on your system, and then you go into Illustrator. And you start a new document. I usually do 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 8.5. We'll do 8.5 by 11 because of the way the comp's set up. And that loads real quick there. A little slower on my machine. Get the tools back. Then you do Apple V or Control V. And it says Compound Shape Fully Editable or Compound Path Faster. I use the Compound Shape in case I want to mess with the layers a little bit. It makes it fully editable. And then that'll put your paths in there. And then what I do is I change this first layer to completely black, even though I may change the color later on. But this is for the stencil, so it doesn't really matter. And then I also do the stroke in black as well. And then I would create a new layer, which is this little thing down at the bottom of your layer palette. Feels like working. The first layer I named black. And you'll see why I use layers here in a minute. Then you go back to Photoshop. I usually throw this path away just so I don't end up copying that one again. Then go back to layer, or select, sorry, color range. You take your next darkest color. You just use your little eyedropper and click on where that color would be. And that gives you that color. Click OK. Make it a work path. Apple C or Control C. Switch back to Illustrator. Control V or Apple V. Oops, I put that earlier. Undo that. And then it may take a little bit of time to line this up properly. That looks about right there. Then I fill this one with I go up a little bit in the gray, about a quarter of the way up. No big deal, just showing you the color differences. Also do the same thing with that, with the stroke. Turn that off, looks about right. There you have basically your layout Yeah, I did this real quick, so it's not the most beautiful thing in the world. And I used a rather low-res picture just so things would go quickly. Then, what you do is when you go to print, this is the little trick I would say, is you turn 2 layers off, you punch the little eyeballs out, that's your black stencil, or whatever your base color, darkest color stencil is, or whatever. Then you would print that, Apple P, then print it to, and I would recommend, I was going to show you this process, but I don't have any paper at the moment. The darkest, use a very heavy, the heaviest weight, smoothest paper you can use. Okay, once you have all those layers printed out, what you're going to basically do is cut the mask to shape. What you're going to need for that is a sacrificial board of some sort, usually a nice hard, I tend to use the back of like a notepad because it's a nice piece of cardboard there, because you don't want to cut up your table underneath. You'll definitely do one of these, an X-Acto knife, or something there that's very, very sharp. The sharper the better mask you're going to get. Okay, let's say we're going to take this like light yellowish part out here. Basically what you're going to do is, there's a couple things you got to pay attention to. I'll show you, like right here, like if you were going to do just a smaller mask, this here is what they call an island. Without silk screening, you can't really do that without connecting it to anything of that same color, because, basically if you have a spot on it that, like, let's say here, like if you were just going to paint this color, not this color, you'd have a problem, because this color doesn't connect to the rest of its own colors, and it wouldn't stand alone, so you'd have to paint this color, or connect, like make this one solid line. So basically what you would do, and I'm just going to do this real quick, is you would I'm going to do a 3-color, but it's only 2 stencil, so I do apologize for that. I'll just do 2 stencils and it'll give you the idea of exactly what we're doing. One of the most important things, I would recommend going higher grade than this, but this right here, some sort of respirator, keep the shit out of your lungs. I'm getting a scrubber sometime this week, a big double scrubber. This shit's bad for you. Okay, some people just use weights as they paint, so I'm talking through my respirator here. Blue dust in my eyes, that's awesome. Okay, but what I found is an amazing secret is this stuff right here, Easy Tack. Basically what you do is you take your first stencil, place it on your sacrificial newspaper, what I tend to use. Shake it up real good. Doesn't sound like spray paint, but shake it up real good. Hold about 6 to 8 inches from the back of your stencil. And shake it everywhere where it's going to touch. Pull it down so it clears. And you can set that aside. Then you take your whatever you're painting on, and you place this on it and press firmly everywhere, all around. It should pretty much stick. Basically what it's basically doing is putting it on the back of your stencil, making it like a post-it note. Typically, sometimes you paint on this is the black stencil here, and then paint. I don't always use spray paint, sometimes I use airbrush, which I find is a little easier to control. It gets a little messier actually than spray paint, which is funny. Then peel away your stencil, which may stick a little bit. And then you have your first layer there. We'll let that dry for a second. I'll have a pause. Alright, we're back. Now I've already sprayed this stencil here, which is my silver stencil or white stencil, whichever, right here. And this is where it's a tiny bit tricky, but you gotta line it up. It's usually not too difficult. I did this one backwards, so I apologize. I used a stencil in a week or so, and I forgot which order it's supposed to go in, but no big fucking deal. Just try to get it to stick a little better. Not a huge deal. If you're doing art, it's, you might want to spray both the canvas, by canvas I mean whatever's going to touch. Okay, then you take your other color, and start shaking up real well, and paint away. Which I screwed.
And there you have it. That's the finished product on that 2 level. 3 level would be exactly the same.